Hello again, honeys, and happy Tuesday. We've got all your latest headlines from the last week, handpicked by yours truly, ready to go here. I'm chilling with my chai tea, so let's review September 28th through October 4th. A few things to follow up on. First, Guillermo del Toro's collection brought in more than $1.65 million at auction. The first part of the Oscar-winning filmmaker's famed Bleak House collection went under the hammer last week, marking the first time that del Toro has offered works from his personal archive. H.R. Giger's painting for the unrealized project The Tourist set an auction record for the Swiss artist as a part of that sale at $325,000. In another twist, that Nazi-looting painting in Argentina that we've seen all that fuss about the last couple of weeks, it turns out it might be by another artist after all. The painting has been widely attributed in the press to Giuseppe Ghislandi, a painter associated with 18th century Italy, but Paolo Plebani, curator of the Accademia Carrara in Bergamo, Italy, which reportedly has a larger collection of Ghislandi paintings than any other institution in the world, said the work may be by someone else altogether while speaking to the Argentine newspaper Clarín. According to the Diario La Capital de Mar del Plata, however, Argentine authorities are still assessing what to do with the work, as Good Stickers heirs are seeking the return of the painting through the New York court system. For now, they are exhibiting the work to the press and planning to store it at the Holocaust Museum in Buenos Aires. Of course, honeys, if Plebani is correct, the work is not a Ghislandi, this new attribution adds another knot in the already complex and dramatic case. Last week also saw artists projecting satirical anti-Trump images around LA, from Jesus being arrested by ICE to Trump eating the Epstein files, quote-unquote guerrilla projections by an anonymous art collective using the moniker VJ Bombs are using humor as a form of protest. The collective, who confirmed to Hyperallergic that they're working-class filmmakers by day, said that they strive to project anti-fascist video street art that challenges political corruption and corporate greed and have chosen to remain anonymous because they, quote, want to bring attention to the art and let it speak for itself, end quote. We also learned that the British Museum will host an inaugural ball sometime this year. Its director, Nicholas Callanan, wrote that the ball is about harnessing and celebrating the British capital, quote, a city that for centuries has been a melting pot of people, trade, and ideas, end quote, while suggesting there was no better hosting venue than, quote, the most visited building in the UK and one of the greatest museums in the world, end quote. Further details will come as we hear them. We also heard that Saudi Arabia and the Deutsche Bank have signed a $1.3 billion cultural partnership. At the first cultural investment conference in the Saudi capital of Riyadh early last week, the nation announced a slew of new cultural funds and agreements worth more than 5 billion Saudi riyals, or roughly 1.3 billion US, including that bank partnership and the immediate establishment of the Riyadh University of Arts, which the Ministry of Culture added will open in 2026, beginning with courses in film, performing arts, and theater. This agreement with Deutsche Bank covers training and mentorship programs as well as 2 recurring annual events. One international cultural delegation hosted by the Saudi Ministry in Riyadh, Jeddah, or another culturally significant spot in the kingdom, as well as another cultural delegation from Saudi Arabia hosted by the bank in Frankfurt, Berlin, or London. We noticed this headline, honeys, because the partnership is another in a growing list of impressive strategic relationships with high-profile museums and arts organizations made by the Saudi government in recent years, which are all part of its broader economic scheme dubbed Vision 2030. That project includes opening more than 200 cultural attractions in the Saudi desert by its target year. Staying in the Middle East for a second, we also learned Bonhams will stage the first Saudi exhibition tracing the roots of its modernism. The 3-day exhibition, titled Judhur Roots, The Origins of Saudi Modernism, opens October 8th at the newly renovated Lift Gallery in Riyadh. It will also be followed by a London auction on November 25th. Artnet News writes that it will, quote, survey the emergence of modern art in Saudi Arabia from early pioneers such as Abdulrahman al-Suleiman, Safia bin Zaghir, and Mohammed al-Salim to artists who came to prominence during the 1980s and later, end quote, but notably foregrounds the contributions of Saudi women artists and art historians. What's interesting is that this program is part of Bonham's broader expansion in the Middle East, which is mostly an economic aim, but has led to new appointments like Susie Sikorsky as business development director for their Middle Eastern division. A real-time example of cultural exchange, of cultural give and take going on between those two headlines. We also got word that the Almaty Museum of Arts opened to the public in Kazakhstan on September 12th in what Artnet News called a, quote, highly anticipated moment for the Kazakhstan cultural scene, end quote, as it is is the country's first private museum dedicated to modern and contemporary art. The new museum reportedly features over 700 artworks by Kazakh and Central Asian artists, as well as international artists from the collection of its founder, auto and real estate tycoon Nurlan Smagulov. That fact of it being a first is one of the reasons we care about this headline. We also care about it because of the potential for friction. As we've covered in some of our Beesnesses this summer, regional museums have had to contend with artistic censorship concerns from the Chinese government, and it remains to be seen how ALMA, as it's being called, plans to navigate those exact challenges. Last week also saw the announcement from an AI company that it had outsmarted Caravaggio experts. The Swiss AI research company Art Recognition says a painting called The Lute Player, long believed to be a copy of a work by Caravaggio, is in fact an original by the Baroque Italian painter. According to reporting by The Guardian, on September 27th, the company's AI analysis of the piece concluded there's an 85.7% likelihood that it is a bona fide Caravaggio. The website for the company boasts that its system can verify an artwork in a few days, quote, based only on a photograph of it, end quote, and cites a list of so-called case studies in which it claims to have authenticated works by Raphael, Van Gogh, Anthony van Dyck in collaboration with academic institutions like Tilburg University and the University of Liverpool. But as you might imagine, the question here is, can we trust these results, especially since they dispute long-held attributions by Sotheby's, the Met, and other experts? In a statement regarding the matter to our sources, Sotheby's said that, quote, while we follow keenly scientific advances in AI and broader technology and collaborate with scientists who are pushing the boundaries in the technical study and understanding of paintings, and, quote, they stood by their attribution of the painting as originating from the circle of Caravaggio and not the artist himself, remaining doubtful as very few paintings by Caravaggio are believed to have survived to the present day. Our next headline, according to the Times of London, the family behind the Fiat Empire is the subject of a new investigation centered around missing artworks and forgeries. This investigation is similar to a 2023 inquiry into the Agnelli family after Italian broadcaster Rai revealed that investigators had discovered that works from the collection were illegally sold abroad or relocated. Rai additionally reported the collection numbered 636 works and was thought to be worth $1 billion in 2023. However, our sources note, Rai's reporting also rubbed Italian politicians the wrong way, as some said afterwards that art collectors should be free to do what they will with the artworks they own. All the same, the Times report published this weekend suggests the investigation stems from a continued dispute surrounding the estate of Gianni and his now deceased wife Marella, who died in 2019, specifically 13 works including some by John Singer Sargent, Picasso, and Francis Bacon. The couple's daughter, Margherita Agnelli de Palan, alleges that these works are missing and that she is being, quote, cheated out of her share of the fortune, end quote, by Marella's 3 children from her first marriage. Italian police are reportedly seeking information about the whereabouts of those 13 works, and we will keep you posted. On a more serious note, last week also saw Trump fire the majority of the Federal Humanities Council. The officially titled National Council on the Humanities reviews and recommends grant proposals and advises the chairperson of the National Endowment for the Humanities. It has a maximum of 26 members at a time. Insiders told our sources that of the 21 members appointed by various presidential administrations and confirmed by the Senate up till last week, only 4 remain, all men and all appointed by the sitting president during his first term. One terminated member, speaking on the condition of anonymity, confirmed to our sources that no people of color remain on the council. According to a list from the NEH's website, among those terminated were distinguished art critic David Hadju, as well as Stanford professor and National Humanities Medal recipient Ramon Saldivar. 2 council members shared the 2-sentence termination notice email they received Wednesday, October 1st from Mary Sproul's, a staffer of the Presidential Personnel Office. With our sources, these notices essentially just said you're terminated, provided a brief thank you for your service, and that was it. Which brings us to the why we care. Even though it's unclear what's next for most of the government, given the shutdown, this latest mass firing is the Trump administration's latest blow to federally funded arts entities established to serve the American public. Quote, a spokesperson told the Washington Post that President Trump intends to fill these positions with individuals who, inner quote, align more closely with his vision, and enter quote. The NEH did not respond to a request for comment, end quote. So it certainly seems to me that because Trump is losing lawsuits in the courts over defunding or unduly influencing or being rid of entirely agencies like the NEH, he's trying a new tactic, loading them up with yes men and getting rid of everyone everyone who's not. And circling back to American museums and the government shutdown for a moment, certain ones will remain open, or so we heard. Some DC institutions in particular remained open last week, running on prior year emergency or endowment funds, for example, the Smithsonian and the National Gallery of Art, but others, especially monuments operated by the National Park Service, will be shut down in terms of visitor services, educational programs, and maintenance until the government begins operating again. Today's sources pointed out that history may be an indicator of what to expect here. The Smithsonian Museums and the National Gallery both shuttered for extended periods during the last significant shutdown, which took place under the first Trump administration in 2019. Not only were exhibitions closed during that shutdown, but Smithsonian employees went unpaid for 35 days, making it the longest government stoppage in U.S. history. According to our sources, the results were really bad for the arts and humanities across the nation that time, and they could be this one as well. Quote, in a statement, the American Alliance of Museums warned that the government shutdown would also halt the already embattled National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And if you'll recall, President Trump has proposed defunding all three of those agencies. And sorry to sound like Dash's gaslit teacher in The Incredibles, but coincidence? I think not. As the American Alliance of Museums stated, quote, museums are powerful economic engines, supporting more than 726,000 jobs and contributing $50 billion annually to the U.S. economy. Even a brief shutdown undermines this impact, end quote. In happier news, UNESCO launched its first virtual Museum of Looted Cultural Objects initiative at its World Conference on Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development in Barcelona on Monday. It's organized by geographic region and divided into further thematic sections and was designed in collaboration with Interpol with funding provided by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Told you they were getting busy with the arts. Some of these thematic sections, however, explain the goal of the virtual initiative. For example, the Return and Restitution Room provides information on how some objects have been recovered. One case study object is a trilobite fossil that was repatriated to Morocco by Chilean customs in 2024. UNESCO stated at the unveiling that the museum was, quote, developed in response to the call of UN member states for a coordinated strategy to raise awareness on illicit trafficking, end quote. Said Audrey Azoulay, the Director General of UNESCO, quote, our objective with this is to place these works back in the spotlight and to restore the right of societies to access their heritage, experience it, and recognize themselves in it, end quote. Headlines also revealed that Italy's art crime squad seized 21 suspected fakes attributed to Salvador Dali from a show in Parma. Titled Dali, Between Art and Myth, it featured 80 drawings, engravings, and tapestries and opened at the Palazzo Tarasconi on September 27th. But a court in Rome ordered the seizure after our heroes, the Carabinieri TPC, aka our beloved Italian art crime squad, and experts in Spain agreed the artworks may not be genuine. According to commander of the Carabinieri TPC's Rome branch, Diego Polio, Italian authorities first suspected the works were forgeries after a routine check in January when they noticed that nothing of importance was included in the exhibition. Quote, it was difficult to understand why someone would want to organize an exhibition of such low-value works, end quote. So, Carabinieri TPC sent an exhibition catalog to the Gala Salvador Dali Foundation in Catalonia in February, who confirmed that it had not been consulted for that show. So, honeys, what now? Italy's culture ministry is in the process of inspecting the works, which could be permanently confiscated if they are confirmed to be fakes. Polio also told Italy's Radio Bruno, quote, if the works are indeed proven to be inauthentic, those who set up the exhibition will have to justify why they exhibited inauthentic works, and of course, may be liable for certain crimes of art forgery, end quote. Meanwhile, Greek police arrested an abbot on charges of religious art trafficking. Per reports in Le Monde and E Kathimerini, Greek authorities have arrested a 63-year-old abbot from the historic Mega Spilaiou monastery in Peloponnese on charges of trafficking religious relics and antiquities following a months-long undercover sting operation. All 6 defendants who were arrested on Monday and are being held by police for their involvement in the alleged attempt to sell 14 looted Byzantine icons and 2 Gospels for for 200,000 euros or 235,000 US dollars are maintaining their innocence. The arrests followed an anonymous tip which allowed investigators to infiltrate the network and which allegedly had connections to auction houses in Germany and Cyprus. So there may be more updates on this one in the future. Last week also saw activists condemn the arrest of New York City protest photographer Alexa Wilkinson, who's credited on protest images circulated widely by groups including the New York American Civil Liberties Union and Writers Against the War in Gaza, or WAWAG. Wilkinson, who uses they-them pronouns, was arrested September 28th according to public court records and was charged with one count of aggravated harassment in the second degree as a hate crime due to their presence as a photographer at a vandalism incident at the New York Times headquarters in Manhattan on July 30th, as well as their alleged reposting of social media comments critical of Times staff members with alleged pro-Israel biases or connections. Notably, 2 other individuals were arraigned on felony charges September 29th for allegedly vandalizing the Times building, but were not charged with hate crimes. Also notable, and a reason why we care, this is not the first time that a witnessing or documenting artist has become legally implicated in New York in the last year. The Brooklyn District Attorney's Office charged videographer Samuel Seligson, a freelance journalist, with a felony hate crime related to documenting the vandalism of Brooklyn Museum director Ann Pasternak's home. Though his lawyer claims he was working as a credentialed press member at the time, Seligson will have his day in court next month. Wilkinson pled not guilty in a preliminary hearing September 29th and will be back in court November 17th. But questions over whether these charges are a form of intimidation of the press, of harassment, or even limiting of the press's freedoms still rightfully linger. The San Francisco Standard additionally reported last week that security guards have accused institution leadership as well as their own union representation of enabling a toxic workplace in an article published earlier this month detailing a decade-long list of grievances against the city, the operator of the de Young, as well as the Legion of Honor museums, in addition to the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. The Standard also noted the city has paid out more than $1 million to settle 7 lawsuits from current and former guards, with more lawsuits reportedly incoming. These include wrongful termination, whistleblower retaliation, and verbal threats. For an example, see our coverage of the most recent suit filed in July by Mohammed Joya, a former museum guard at the de Young who alleges, quote, disability discrimination, religious and racial harassment, and wrongful termination, end quote, among other infractions. The twist here is that the guards have also accused their own union, SEIU 1021, of failure to resolve the alleged pattern of ongoing abuse, which they claim is due in part to a conflict of interest. The union also represents 6 of the department's 9 managers. The response from the museums has been lackluster. A representative told the Standard that the series of lawsuits filed by security guards, quote, concern events primarily from 2014 to 2016, and emphasized that leadership has changed since then, end quote, yet the Standard article lists at least 7 lawsuits of the 9 which occurred after 2016 and/or which involve current or so-called recently former staff. A report in the Art newspaper also tuned us into the fact that the Louisiana State Museum system is at risk of losing its accreditation by the American Alliance of Museums. It was last accredited in 2011, and a decision on its future status will reportedly be issued sometime next year. I can already practically hear some of you asking, what's the big deal? Well, AAM accreditation, quote, offers high-profile, peer-based validation of your museum's operation and impact, end quote, and helps in terms of, quote, credibility and value to funders, policymakers, insurers, community, and peers, end quote. So how does one maintain accredited status? A museum has to first achieve its stated mission and goals, and second, perform in a way that meets standards and best practices as they're generally understood in the museum field. So what is the Louisiana State Museum system's problem? According to the Art newspaper, a 2023 audit of it discovered, quote, a poor work culture and persistent conflation of political and public interests by the entities charged with its oversight and management, end quote. That audit reportedly further cited, quote, low morale and high turnover among its employees, poor record keeping, a lack of public transparency, and a failure to maintain a strategic plan or a detailed budget, end quote. Yet even though this audit found that the system is basically not doing any of its responsibilities, we had an intriguing response from Rebecca Mackey, the acting director of the Louisiana State Museums. She told the Art newspaper, quote, as long as there's a state museum system that is part of state government, politics will always be a part of it. The challenge is going to be to, as always, focus on what's important for the collection and making sure that the people have access to this history, end quote. quote. I feel as though she may have missed the point in that response. It's going to be harder to do that, to make sure people have access to history when partnerships don't materialize because the system doesn't have the legitimacy of accreditation. She might very well know something that I don't, but it seems a little short-sighted. UC Irvine also finished its acquisition of the Orange County Museum of Art last week. All OCMA employees are now employees of the renamed blended entity UC Irvine Langston Orange County Museum of Art, which is just so nice and concise, effective immediately, and the OCMA board has been dissolved. Another expansion-related piece of news today, 5 New York City arts nonprofit organizations have joined the Cultural Institutions Group, the BRIC of Brooklyn, the Louis Armstrong House Museum in Queens, the Bronx Children's Museum, the Noble Maritime Collection on Staten Island, and the Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theater have joined the collective of previously 34 privately managed institutions operating on city-owned property, whose members include museums, gardens, performing arts centers, and zoos. They provide discounted programming such as free membership for city residents in exchange for significant funding and energy subsidies from New York's Department of Cultural Affairs. The induction of these 5 is important because it represents the largest cross-borough expansion of the institutional group in nearly 5 decades and focuses on communities historically in need of arts and culture funding. And we're particularly happy to see that arts funding element at a time of increasing economic volatility, especially in the city's arts and culture sector. The department confirmed on September 30th that this expansion is supported by $3 million in funding added to the city's operating budget by Mayor Eric Adams. And speaking of New York, Syracuse University paused admission for fine arts and digital humanities last week, then announced the opening of an academic center for podcasters and influencers. The decision to pause these admissions last week was made by the institution's Senate in its first meeting of the 2025-26 academic year without faculty input. According to the university's newspaper, the Daily Orange, concerns rose between faculty who felt that it was a, quote, disproportionate targeting of humanities programs, end quote. Many of them called their lack of involvement in this decision-making process, quote, disturbing, end quote. Majors impacted by the expected one-year pause will no longer appear on Syracuse's common application form for incoming freshmen and transfer students, but the classes within these pause programs will still be offered for students already enrolled. It's unknown when exactly the administration will make a final decision regarding each program. A few days later, though, the university announced the establishment of its new Center for the Creator Economy, the first academic center of its kind on a college campus to focus on the current creator-driven economic landscape. Mike Haney, Vice Chancellor for Strategic Initiatives and Innovation and Executive Dean of the Whitman School, said in a statement, quote, the creator economy represents one of the most significant cultural and commercial transformations of our time. Syracuse is seizing the opportunity to lead in preparing students to thrive at the intersection of creativity, commerce, and digital innovation, end quote. Yet, even our sources point out this may be a moot venture as 42% of American teenagers earned income through digital channels in 2024, according to a report from the Pew Research Center, meaning it's unclear how many teens will actually be attracted to the school's new center. It's possible the school will only see students who are a bit behind that curve interested in joining up. More importantly, it seems questionable to me, even an admitted creator, podcaster, to focus such a prestigious school's educational offerings on how to recognize and monetize online trends, how to maximize social media for income, versus on developing critical thought and good presentational skills and other universally job-applicable skills, which I can promise you from experience come in handy for the business development planning, the marketing, the networking, all sorts of things, like the sort we learn in the humanities majors that were paused. And our final headline for the day, honeys, we learned that cultural workers are rushing to document the history that Trump wants to erase, more specifically 2 volunteer groups, Citizen Historians in Washington, D.C., and Minnesota's Save Our Signs, are methodically cataloging thousands of artifacts in hopes that their databases will preserve thoughtfully researched and curated historical narratives despite the Trump administration's continuous efforts to modify existing content displays. Citizen Historians has already, quote, taken more than 31,000 photographs in a period of 5 weeks, accounting for 56% of the exhibits displayed in the Smithsonian Museum system, end quote. The Save Our Signs group, founded in conjunction with the Data Rescue Project, meanwhile, has been tracking instances of sign removal or alteration in a publicly accessible spreadsheet, as well as providing a before-after comparison section where members can view snapshots of the altered signs. For example, one at Muir Woods in California that was reportedly scrubbed this June of historical details pertaining to Indigenous people, women, and instances of racism. Both of these volunteer initiatives are figuring out how to store their data in the long term, but are acting quickly to try and capture as much as possible before the Trump administration's calls for content editing measures, the scope of which are still unknown, I might add, are answered at both national parks and the Smithsonian beginning this month. We found this story worth sharing because it's one of resilience and responsibility, said Chandra Manning, an American historian focused on the 19th century and a founder of Citizen Historians, stated, quote, "If it is possible to edit stories, experiences, people, and whole groups out of the past, it becomes that much easier to edit or erase them from the present or even the future," end quote. Manning went on to say, quote, "The Smithsonian doesn't belong to one person. All of these things are part of our shared national treasures, and usually that means we all get to enjoy them, but sometimes it means that all of us have to take responsibility for safeguarding them, and that's what's happening right now," end quote. And there, honeys, is our a bit long business for the week. As always, we hope you were as entertained as you were educated by this episode. I'm off to enjoy the leftovers from my apple cider donut tour of the Madison area this weekend, which is not a real thing, but rather something I hodgepodged together based on my knowledge of who was selling cider donuts where in the Madison area. If you're local and interested, you can find that map as a part of our most recent Instagram reel, but that is where I leave you for today. So, hydrate or dihydrate, take care, we will talk soon. This podcast is produced, created, hosted, formerly edited, and fact-checked by master's degree holder Celia Bugno. Chris Meinhold is responsible for our editing, mixing, and our intro and outro music. Special thanks to him for that. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, so on all your favorite listening as well as social media channels.